Joining me right now, we have Jen Psaki, host of Inside with Jen Psaki on MSNBC. Thank you for sticking around, my friend.
Doing Thank you. I'm following Mark Murray, who knows so much about all of the numbers, so I will do my best.
I know. We all learn so much from him when he drops these polls. Let's get to 23 days until the election day. So this new poll shows Harris has lost some ground in the last month. Is the apparent drop expected, Jen, or is it concerning? I mean, a function of what the vice president is doing or not doing, or is it something Trump is doing?
Well, look, first of all, if you're sitting on a campaign, you don't look at the national polls. You look at the state polls. Now, the thing is the state polls also show a very close razor-thin race where Harris is up in some states, she's down in some states, but that's what they're really looking at because it's not a national race. It is a race about 6 or 7 states. I think in some ways, as Mark was just saying, it comes kind of back down to earth. This was always going to be a close race. There are a range of factors and reasons for that. And when you look and dig into the data, you can see some of the reasons, including that Harris is behind where maybe people expected her to be among black men. She's behind where Obama was and even where Biden was on election day among Latino voters. So there are some areas that have been more historically relied upon by Democrats. And those may be about shifts demographically, just generationally. As younger voters or younger Latino voters, a lot of the black men are younger black men. It may be that as a factor. And there may be some issues at play, too. But lots of factors that you can see in the data.
So with regard to gender, with each one lagging with members of the opposite sex, which one has the bigger gender problem?
Well, look, at the end of the day, you just want more votes on election day. I mean, for Harris, her movement among women, including white women, who Trump has won historically, is a good thing. And largely that's, of course, as you saw in that poll, I think, because of abortion rights and abortion rights being at risk. But the Harris-Walz team clearly knows they need to make up more ground with men and with black men specifically. You can see by some of the things they're doing, some of the media they're doing, some of the outreach they're doing, even Tim Walz going to a football game, doing things along those lines. They know they need to kind of meet people where they are. What'd you say?
Yeah. Pheasant hunting yesterday.
Pheasant hunting, yes. Pheasant hunting is probably not appealing to suburban women, I don't think. Things along those lines, exactly.
Yeah. But with regard to turnout on an election day, who typically is the more reliable gender? Who gets to the polls and does it?
Well, here's the challenging thing. I mean, the electorate looks slightly different every 4 years. So even when you measure, say, women voters, female voters against 2020, a big seismic thing happened since then, the Dobbs decision, right? So it is hard, and every electorate is slightly different. This is when people say, well, people just have to recreate, candidates have to recreate the Obama coalition. Well, nobody can create the Obama coalition except for Obama, right? Biden had his own coalition, which was more leaned more into seniors and some other demographic groups. Harris will have her own coalition if she wins. So in terms of turnout, yes, people always say young voters don't turn out. Well, young voters sure seem pretty engaged right now. We just have to kind of see what happens on election day, and I don't think we're going to know until it actually happens.
But what's interesting, and I'm thinking of your guest on your show, James Carville, when he always says, it's the economy, stupid. Interesting that, as Mark put it, when we were talking, the way they phrased this question, abortion is the #1 motivating, let's get to the polls and do it. So you would think that would benefit women to get out there and do it.
Well, it's definitely benefiting benefiting Harris and the Harris-Walz campaign as it relates to the shift of women and that gender gap in that regard. So there's no question about that. Also, for younger women, this is obviously an issue. It's not just an issue for younger women, but certainly is a motivator. It's such an interesting way that question was asked, and I think is quite telling, because right now, in 3 weeks out, what they're trying to do if you're sitting on a campaign is get people to vote early, vote by mail, so you can bank those votes and not have to worry about them on election day. That's a big focus. What's the motivator for that? And then you're trying to get less likely voters, maybe people who vote in just presidential cycles, maybe people who never vote in special elections, these voters that that don't even typically always vote in presidential elections. Those are people that you need to get out to expand your coalition and expand your vote total. And obviously both campaigns are focused on that in different ways. I mean, I would argue Trump's strategy is a little different from Harris's. I think she's trying to expand the electorate, expand who's voting, pull over people, independents and others. Trump is like this, down negative campaign where he's trying to kind of take Harris down too, take her down a peg, make it seem harder to vote, make it harder to vote. It's a bit of a different strategy. But yes, for the Harris campaign, I think it's definitely the focus, expanding the electorate, getting those less likely voters out.
So we have Barack Obama, who campaigned for Harris in Pennsylvania last week. He's going to be in Arizona and Nevada this week. You've got Bill Clinton in Georgia today, as well as tomorrow. Will these events, Jen, move the needle? And if not, who can do that? Would it be maybe Michelle Obama, or is it really just up to the candidate herself?
I mean, President Obama would love nothing more than to hear that his wife is more of a motivator than him, but she may be. Look, I think she's a phenomenal campaigner. He's a phenomenal campaigner, too. I don't know that it's a massively moving the needle as much as it's a motivator, right? And one of the things that President Obama is so good at, and I have been on the campaign trail with him for more events than perhaps anybody, is getting people to understand the urgency of the moment. And you heard him do that. And when he was on the trail on Thursday, you heard him have that specific warning to young black men who, whether it's sexism or disinformation or a view on an issue, he was speaking directly to that demographic and that group for a period of that speech. That is what he's very good at. Like, get off your couch, go vote now. I don't know that people should bet on it. And Bill Clinton's very good at that, too, that it's just going to swing the polls massively. It's not about that. It's about getting people to get off their couch and go vote in this moment and engage in the process.
And here's what you're really good at, breaking this all down for us, my friend.
Oh,
thank you so much
Alex.
for your time.
I always love talking to you.
Always fun.